All right, example number 1, simplify. We have two different expressions to simplify, and what makes this one, what makes these ones a little bit trickier than in 7.3, remember we have binomial, okay? It means that there's two terms. That's p plus something, or p minus something, or x minus something, or we have more than one term in the bottom. Before we would just multiply all the things together and then just cancel. This one has an extra added step. So step number 1, what we need to figure out is what is the lowest common denominator. This is very similar to say something like having a denominator of 3 and 4. This one you can simply multiply them together because they're not to the power of anything. And there's nothing that's repeated. This one does not have any p minus 2, and this denominator has nothing that's p plus 1. So our lowest common denominator is just going to be p minus 2 and p plus 1. Whenever we create the lowest, or whenever we discover what the lowest common denominator is, it's really easy to say non-permissible values. P cannot equal -1 from here, or +2 from here. If you state them as soon as you write your lowest common denominator, it's just really easy, because it's kind of something that's easy to forget, right? So if you just do it here, you won't forget it later. Since our lowest common denominator is p minus 2 times p plus 1, when I look at this one, I want to cover up what's in my denominator so I know what I need to multiply by. So I'm just going to write it like this. This one gets a little bit complicated, so I'm just going to write my first one, p minus 1, over p minus 2. But what I want to do is I want to multiply by what I need to get the lowest common denominator of that. Okay? So I'm going to multiply by p plus 1 over p plus 1. Which incidentally is 1. We're just multiplying by 1. We're just making our, we're just giving our fractions a nicer form so that we can add and subtract them. Now with this one, we're going to say plus, and I'm gonna keep this plus, okay? That looks like plus and minus, but it's just plus. P plus 3 over p plus 1. Now I know that p plus 1 is in this denominator, so I'm gonna cover over p plus 1. So I need to multiply this fraction here by p minus 2 over p minus 2. So if I just to write this out again, I'm going to say p minus 1 times p plus 1 plus p plus 3 in brackets times p minus 2 all over p minus 2 p plus 1 p plus 1 p minus 2. So ta-da! That's kind of the check that we can do to make sure that we have multiplied by the correct thing. So I know all over the common denominator of p minus 2 p plus 1. This guy right here is going to be p squared minus 1, because we notice that this is just a factorization of a difference of squares. Plus, and we're lucky that this is a plus, right? Because then we don't have to carry through that negative. Dun dun dun! Just letting you know we have fun over here. So this is p squared plus p minus 6 all over p minus 2 p plus 1. Now what we want to do is we want to collect like terms here. So we're going to have something that looks like 2p squared plus p minus 7 all over p minus 2 p plus 1. Let's move on to the next question. We're seeing a negative sign here. Ooh, we're also seeing a number subtracting, sorry, a perfect square minus a perfect square. So we're thinking ding, 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 difference of squares. The only thing that kind of makes me go is the fact that the number comes first and then the letter. I think we might have a -1 thing, folks. So what makes this different from this question here is that this has, this is factored already. Whereas this one, we need to do a little bit of fancy footwork to get it in its most simple form. So let's do that fancy footwork. This one's nice. 2 over, and I'm just going to stick it in brackets right away, just so that we think of this as one factor. Minus 3e over 3 minus e, 3 plus e. No, what? 3 plus 8. 3 plus e. What happens if I factor out a -1 here? And this becomes -3, and this becomes positive e. If I were to say, I'm just going to do some side work here. So let me just show you. If I were to factor a -1 out of 3 minus e, it would become -3 plus e. I could just rewrite it as -e minus 3, because there's a plus sign in front of the e, and there's a negative sign in front of the 3. So I can just change around the order so that we don't have that crazy negative sign right in the beginning. So I'm going to do that, okay? Equals 2 over e minus 3 minus 3e. Please notice that I'm rewriting the numerators and denominators. I know it's a lot of work to write all this stuff down, but this is the proper format. So instead of 3 minus e, I just did some side work here, okay? So I can write negative e minus 3. See how this is 3 plus e? I can just easily write e plus 3. Let's put the variable first because that looks nicer. All right, so we have a negative and a negative here. What does that become? It means that there's a positive, there's a addition happening between these two terms. Alright, so this is a really great point to figure out what our lowest common denominator is. Lowest common denominator. We're taking care of our e minus 3. We're also considering our e plus 3. And at this point, it's really a great time to consider what our non-permissible values are. Our non-permissible values are e cannot equal positive or negative 3. Done. Now we can simplify it. We notice that this...
Ms. O'Neill, please come to the office. Ms. O'Neill, please come to the office.
We notice that this is actually the lowest common denominator, right? So we don't actually have to do anything to this fraction here, but this one, we need to multiply it by something. So e minus 3, if I cover that up, I need to multiply it by e plus 3 over e plus 3. So 2 over 3 minus e times e plus 3 over e plus 3. And again, I don't have to do anything to this, but you bet your bottom dollar I need to write it down. 3e over e minus 3, e plus 3. So then we actually get something 2 times e, 2 times e is 2e plus, because of that, plus 2 times 3, 6, plus what? 3e all over the common denominator, which is going to be e minus 3, e plus 3. I'm just going to do my work here because it'll cut off to the bottom. I need to collect like terms. 5e plus 6 all over e minus 3, e plus 3. Stated my non-permissible value, so this question is done.